The state revenue department has been hacked.
An investigation News 19 broke first.
One of the most serious security breaches that has ever taken place in the state of South Carolina.
First on air, online, Facebook, Twitter. News 19 on your side.
Right now on News 19 at 6.
Not a good day for South Carolina.
South Carolina hacked.
This was somebody internationally out of the country that did this to us.
Millions of people's information possibly taken by foreign hackers.
I don't think that any of us are safe, again, that are hooked to computers and hooked to the internet.
What our On Your Side investigation uncovered and what's being done to protect those of us at risk.
This is something that shouldn't happen to not the state, but this happened to me as well as you.
Our team coverage continues right now on News 19.
And good evening. Thanks for being with us. I'm J.R. Barrett.
And I'm Darcy Strickland. If you have filed a state tax return since 1998, your personal information may have been hacked.
Someone hacked into the state revenue department, gaining access to 3.6 million Social Security numbers. About 387,000 credit and debit card numbers were also exposed. 16,000 of those were unencrypted. SLED Chief Mark Keel saying today the Secret Service notified the necessary people involved and the investigation started from there. They say the breach was international, but the problem apparently has been fixed. However, they're encouraging everyone to call a toll-free number to enroll in a 1 year of identity protection service. The state will pay for a year of that service for any affected taxpayer. The officials did not know yet what the cost of all that's going to be.
We were tipped off to this story earlier this week. We started our investigation, and that leads us to today.
Our team coverage of this security breach begins with Nate Stewart, who started working on this story several days ago.
Yeah, JR, and you know, this morning, SLED, the Secret Service, the director of the South Carolina Department of Revenue, and the State Inspector General all met privately with News 19 after we started asking questions. We wanted to know more about the security breach that has affected millions in this state. These are taxpayers' credit cards and IDs in this state. They have a right to know what was taken from them, what is being done about it.
From a law enforcement standpoint, we are doing everything that we can to investigate this case.
384,000 credit cards and 3.6 million Social Security numbers from South Carolinians were exposed to an international hacker.
We take tax payments through credit card, and so that information is encrypted. All that information is encrypted. And to the best of our knowledge, the encryption that was out there, it meets all the industry standards.
In our investigation, our sources tell us the breach came from Russia. SLED admits the first hack that occurred on August 27th came from a foreign IP address, but they wouldn't confirm which country that is.
It is a very sensitive, ongoing investigation of which we hope ultimately we will be able to bring someone to justice, and because of that, it would be inappropriate to comment at this time.
If they can get credit card numbers, what's stopping them from getting state funds?
Those servers are completely separate from what was breached, and we reconcile every day to the penny what comes in and what is transferred. In this instance, where the hole has been plugged and that those systems are secure.
We wanted to know why not announce this information a month ago when they first learned. News 19 was told the investigation needed to reach specific, quote, benchmarks before telling the public.
From our perspective, we were protecting the taxpayers by allowing the case to move forward, and we were monitoring to make sure that the data was not being removed from the files.
While millions of South Carolinians' identities hang in the balance, no arrests have been made. The South Carolina State Inspector General Pat Maley has been asked by the governor to begin to assess the entire state government security system. The initial plan includes forming a task force and coming up with a long-term strategy on how to best secure the information in the state government. We spoke with the Inspector General privately about current strategies in place to protect government networks.
And the first thing you do is you go and find out what are the requirements and what are the standards of information security program in state government. And the answer to that question are there is no mandatory standards in state government. There is a DCIT has a recommended policy for the agencies out there to adopt or not adopt, and so that was our starting point.
There are no standards in place.
No standards in place at this time.
I should point out you met with these guys about 10:30 this morning, and about 3 hours later they released this information. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, Nate, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
After News 19 had our private meeting this morning, the Governor Nikki Haley, joined SLED and the Secret Service at a press conference.
Clark Foraker continues our team coverage with what the governor had to say. And Clark, she was none too happy.
Not a happy girl today, JR, as you might imagine. The governor saying it was not a good day in South Carolina. Didn't hide really any of her feelings when it came to the international hacker who's stolen personal data from our state.
This was somebody internationally out of the country that did this to us. That's what makes this so bad, is because I can't go call him in a room and kick him and kick him.
Governor Haley made it clear how she feels about the hacker behind a breach of South Carolina Department of Revenue servers.
I have made it very clear to my chief that I want this person slammed against the wall.
The breach allowed someone to steal taxpayer information. While Governor Haley knows where that international hacker is, she says telling us would compromise the investigation.
I have also asked for an executive order by the Inspector General that we do a full-scale research of all of our agencies on international cyber attacks or cyber attacks of this kind.
Haley says an outside agency has identified and patched those holes to the best of the state's knowledge.
While we now have it protected, we want to make sure that everybody understands that our state will respond with a big, large-scale plan that is somewhat unprecedented to take care of this problem.
Now, the governor says she's going to make sure every South Carolina citizen is taken care of. She even says she spoke with her husband this morning about the issue, reminding everyone in the press room today she filed a tax return too. Now, in our exclusive interview this morning we've told you about with SLED Chief Mark Keel and the Secret Service, we found out exactly when this breach happened. That's been one of the big questions all day. Also in the meeting this morning, the director of the Department of Revenue, the Inspector General, and a representative of the security cyber firm hired by the state to fix this hacking problem. We had a chance to get a lot of information about the investigation, where it is today, and how it all started. We know the first breach of systems happened at the Department of Revenue back on August 27th. We also know that the hacker penetrated the servers at 2 more times in September. Then we know September 13th, the hacker actually extracted information from that server at the DOR. That includes the 3.6 million social security numbers and more than 380,000 credit and debit card numbers. These are the credit and debit cards that were used to pay taxes to the Department of Revenue. Then almost a month later, October 10th, the governor finally informed of this breach. And then 10 days later, October 20th, the hole was closed, says the state, and the system secured to the best of their knowledge. Darcy?
Clark, thank you. As we mentioned, this affects a lot of people in our state, more than 75%. There are 4.6 million people living in South Carolina. 3.6 million people have had their social security numbers stolen or their credit card information.
News 19's Jenny Wurzberger spoke with some of your neighbors and got their reaction to this breach. She joins us now with the very latest on that. Jenny, I'm sure their reaction is just like ours is, just wow, what do I do now?
Absolutely, Darcy. That's what many of them had to say. And I went out and spoke to people just after the press conference this afternoon. Many of them saying they're scared and frustrated. Their information could be in the hands of a hacker. Their biggest complaint is how long it took officials to come out and tell them about the security breach.
That this originally happened on August the 27th and that it took so long, in my mind, for it to come to light and determine what occurred. And also makes me really concerned and worried about what happens when we cut resources to state budgets so that we don't have the proper support to make sure that we manage these type of incursions and make sure we've got enough security.
I mean, the first couple of days they need to make us aware, so as us South Carolinians, we need to be aware of who have access to our accounts, who have access to our social security numbers, and we never know what's going on.
Just hope that it gets resolved and that there's no big backlash, no permanent damage done, and that there are safeguards put in place, that our governor is vigilant about this and keeps us safe.
And many of the people that I spoke with also say in light of this happening, they plan to be more aware of their spending and plan to closely monitor their bank accounts online, as you can imagine. JR. Darcy.
All right, Jen, thank you so much. As you just heard from Jenny, lots of people are concerned about their credit.
Now, the state is recommending anyone who has filed a tax return since 1998 to visit protectmyid.com or call them to sign up for a free credit monitoring service. Sydney Cummins has been on this part of the story all day long. You made some phone calls. It's kind of difficult to get through right now.
I did. You know, I first called at about 12:30 today and got through with very little wait time. The past couple of hours I've been trying to get through again, and I have not been able to. But that's what the state is telling us to do right now. Call that Experian data breach solution hotline. Many of you, though, are calling here right after to tell us that that's not working. That number, 866-578-5422. But how that works is you're going to give them your information, and they can set you up with a year of free identity protection service. You'll have to give them personal information, though, your name, address, social security number, or you can get an activation code from them and complete the process online. Now, obviously, your social security number is all over the documents that you would use to file your state income taxes, not to mention all of the other ways that you've given your information to the Department of Revenue, and that's what officials are really concerned about. Another issue in all this is if you've ever used your credit or debit card to pay the Department of Revenue. Officials are saying if that's the case, you need to monitor that bank statement, that credit card statement, and report any unusual activity to those companies immediately so that they can cancel your card and issue a new one. The Department of Consumer Affairs actually spoke with us a little bit earlier this afternoon, and they recommended also that you can call Equifax, which is another one of the 3 credit bureaus. They can put a fraud alert on your information, and that is free for 90 days. And basically what that does, it makes it a little bit more difficult for someone to use your social security number or use your information to do anything with. They'll have to jump through lots of hoops, and of course you'll be alerted when that happens. Now that number is 800-525-6285. One other thing that I want to point out really quickly, I know we've been talking about how much paying for this free this year of identity protection is going to cost the state. We don't know that number yet, but we do know how much it would cost you if you had to pay for it. That's $49.95 a year times however many residents in South Carolina are actually going to be using this service, so it could add up to a lot of money. JR, Darcy.
But again, Sydney, if people don't want to try to call that number the state gave out today, again, there are other people out there that can help them, correct?
Sure, like I mentioned, that Equifax number, and you know, there are 3 different credit bureaus that you can call. The Experian number that they're giving out, they're doing that because that can give you a free year of that identity protection plan that the state will pay for.
All right, Sydney Cummins live from our information center. Sid, thank you.
And then there is this tonight. Some 2 days after this hacking was uncovered, the Defense Secretary spoke in New York about how large-scale hacking poses a giant risk to national security. He says it goes beyond just getting information on your social security number or credit card information.
The internet is open. It's highly accessible, as it should be. But that also presents a new terrain for warfare. It is the battlefield of the future, where adversaries can seek to do harm to our country, to our economy, and to our citizens.
Well, there were some warning signs that such an attack was being attempted. In February, the director of the Motor Vehicles Department told lawmakers that foreign hackers were attacking that agency's computer system on a daily basis. The governor ordered a state review of computer security for all agencies since April. The inspector general found, though, there is no statewide centralized system for state agencies. The Budget and Control Board says it would be impossible to know how many security breaches have happened. A former FBI agent working on these security issues for the state says one major problem is most agencies do not have a response plan if a cyber attack takes place.
We've got a lot of coverage on WLTX.com on this story, from us to our paper, the Greenville News, who have worked with us on this story. Now, if you missed the phone number or web address to sign up for your year of free credit monitoring, you can find all that information on our website as well. And again, if you've missed any part of this story, you can find all of that available online at WLTX.com.
New information tonight regarding the security breach that has affected millions of South Carolinians. Florence Senator Hugh Leatherman has formed a Senate committee to investigate exactly what happened at the State Revenue Department. News 19's Nate Stewart has the latest now from our information center. Nate, what's going on?
Yeah, JR, Senator Kevin Bryant and Senator Billy Odell, both upstate Republicans, have been appointed to co-chair the committee that is set to determine what happened and who is to blame. Now, that first meeting will happen right after Thanksgiving. Senator Bryant tells News 19 they hope to find out how one of the most sensitive databases in the state was one of the least protected. In addition to the investigation, the committee hopes to speak with other state agencies that also have state information. Now, Governor Haley says a probe into the hacking of the South Carolina tax returns is set to be delivered to us later this week. She hopes to have that report to News 19 later this week. In the Information Center, Nate Stewart, News 19 WLTX.
It has been 3 weeks since News 19 first told you that more than 3 million Social Security numbers were stolen by an international hacker at the Department of Revenue.
Well, today the governor released some new information about security measures being put into place. Nate Stewart's been following the story since he broke it about a little more than 3 weeks ago.
That's right, JR. Today, the governor issued an executive order to require state agencies to comply with the Division of State Information Technology. That will include 24/7 monitoring. DSET staff and 6 agency employees will do the monitoring. The governor also said that the state will be getting a computer system that will monitor the networks and will shut them down if files are downloaded. Now, the cost of that computer is around $160,000 and will be paid for by Homeland Security.
What I have learned is these international hackers are not going to do this from 9 to 5. They are going to do this in the hours when nobody's in the office. We need somebody in the office 24 hours a day monitoring those computers to make sure that the second they see an intrusion, they can stop it.
Now, we've been on your side asking questions about the security company who's been working with the state since 2005. The company TrustWave was hired to protect your data. Now, on November 5th, under the Freedom of Information Act, News 19 requested the Department of Revenue give us the contracts between them, Experian, and TrustWave. Today, we were given both of those contracts from the Department of Revenue. We learned that last week the department said that they spent $231,000 over the last 5 years on security from this company, TrustWave. The contract that runs through 2016 specifies that TrustWave's main focus is to protect credit card data at the Department of Revenue. They did this by 24-hour monitoring and a once-a-month vulnerability scan. The contract states one of the main objectives of hiring TrustWave was to make sure the Department of Revenue was PCI compliant. That is a standard for companies who want to accept credit cards online. The second contract we received today was from Experian, the company the state has hired to monitor your credit since the breach. That contract is for a flat fee of $12 million. It does confirm that family secure services are offered to protect the defendants on your tax forms. It also notes that the state has paid a fee of 20 cents per call to an Experian call center that is worked into that flat rate. Now, we are continuing to sift through this contract. JR, as you can see, this contract is pretty thick right here. I've got it here, but we're continuing to look through it and speak with the Department of Revenue about this. Now, what we've learned is that the TrustWave contract to protect your credit card numbers, they hired them to do that and to get them to this PCI standard, and then they used their own in-house systems to monitor those Social Security numbers that were also hacked.
Right, but do we know yet what protections they had in place to secure the Social Security numbers?
Right, well, we know that they weren't encrypted at the time, but during the time of the breach, we've learned that the Department of Revenue did have 2 firewalls, regular virus scanning on all desktop and laptop machines, web filtering, and spam filtering. They were also receiving some protection through the state's DSET data monitoring system. So still a lot of details to be hashed out from this hacking story that we've been telling you about for nearly 3 weeks now.
Now, during the press conference, she talked a lot about DSET, and honestly, that's the first time I'd ever heard of it.
Right, that is the state monitoring system that monitors some of the cabinet agencies here in South Carolina. However, they were not asked to monitor the Social Security numbers at the Department of Revenue because they could not offer this PCI compliance that this company TrustWave could.
All right, Nate, thank you.
Governor Haley announced today Jim Etter, the director of the State Revenue Department, has stepped down after his agency failed to protect valuable taxpayer information that was stolen by an international hacker.
Now, even though he is stepping down, he's going to stay on the job until the end of the year. That's when Bill Bloom will take over as interim director. We have also learned tonight the exact number of people in our state affected in the Department of Revenue security breach.
Haley says 3.8 million tax filers were compromised, including 1.9 1.9 million dependents, 3.7 million bank accounts, almost 700,000 business profiles, and 5,000 credit cards that were all expired.
News 19's Nate Stewart was at the State House News Conference. He has been following the story since he broke it for you last month. Nate, what's going on today?
Well, JR, Governor Haley says that the state should have done more to protect taxpayers' data at the South Carolina Department of Revenue. Today, we learned that those who filed taxes electronically were only the ones affected in the breach. Governor Haley says that the state knows the specific people who are affected and will be mailing out letters soon. Now, the report that was released today confirms the breach was successful through a phishing email that was opened by a South Carolina Department of Revenue employee. Now, that report, which you can find on our website, WLTX.com, describes in detail the extent in which the attacker gained access to the databases. Today, Governor Haley said that the state should have done more to protect taxpayers.
Did we have a chance to do a better job? And we did. There were two vulnerabilities that we found. One was that we had that there was no dual verification to get into the system. The second one was that the encryption of the Social Security data wasn't there. And so I think when you combine the fact that we had 1970 equipment, combined with the fact that we were IRS compliant, was a cocktail for an attack.
Now, the governor has sent this letter to the IRS asking them to require all states to have stronger security measures for handling federal tax information. The governor says she is meeting with the congressional delegation at the end of this month and will tell them all they need to be on cyber alert. Now, as for what is being done here in this state, we've learned that Social Security numbers at the Department of Revenue are currently being encrypted. The state also told us last week that they have purchased a piece of equipment that will begin monitoring state agencies 24 hours a day to prevent this type of thing from happening again. Of course, if you want to sign up for credit protection, the state is urging you to go to the website Experian. All that information can be found on our website on WLTX.com. In the Information Center, Nate Stewart, News 19, WLTX. And what we already know is that the hacker gained access to the system through a phishing email, then stole the employee's username and password. Today, however, we heard that a small, cheap piece of added security could have prevented putting millions of South Carolinians' identities at risk.
We were asked to determine the data loss.
The director of the security company Mandiant, hired to investigate the breach at the South Carolina Department of Revenue, says because the hacker logged in using an employee's credentials, the system didn't detect a threat.
From a systems perspective, everything that happened looked normal.
But Marshall Hillman tells the Senate subcommittee that an added layer of password protection, like a changing security key number you have to enter manually, would have prevented the attack.
But in this particular case, as the attack occurred, if the Department of Revenue had multi-factor authentication on that remote access system, the attacker would not have been able to log in using the user's credentials.
Senator Kevin Bryant from Anderson is stunned.
The multi-factored authentication, finally got it, could have prevented this. Would not have cost any more than $25,000.
Jim Etter, director of the Department of Revenue, told the committee from September of 2011 to August of 2012 they were without a cybersecurity officer. The first malicious email was sent on August 13th.
We were actively looking for someone at that point, so we were not sitting on our heels, not trying to find someone.
Etter says the former chief information officer could not find anyone willing to accept the job for $100,000.
I mean, how many banks go 11 months without a security guard?
The committee asked SLED Director Mark Keel if he knows if any of the stolen security numbers have been used. He replied, "I don't know." As more questions rise, so do the frustrations among lawmakers.
I got 110,000 constituents, and they are fuming, and they should be. The government dropped the ball. This is a disaster.
In 2006, the State Revenue Department did look into encrypting all the data. A study showed it would have cost $5 million to achieve that level of encryption. However, Director Jim Etter said they never pursued or requested that money from the state. JR, the agency is now looking into spending the $25,000 on getting that updated password security so that something like this doesn't happen again.
Hopefully the other agencies in state government will be doing the same thing.
Yeah, that's something we're going to have to keep taking a look at and speaking with state officials about.
The state's inspector general has released an interim report assessing the data security in our state's agencies.
That report is calling for a new statewide information security program, citing the current one is not acceptable. News 19's Nate Stewart was first to obtain a copy of this report. He has the latest from the Information Center tonight. Nate?
Yeah, that's right, JR. The Inspector General's report says the state has not fixed responsibility, accountability, and authority for statewide data security. The 18-page document cites new recommendations that one state lawmaker says he agrees with. The Inspector General's report released Tuesday paints a picture of South Carolina's state agencies grossly underprotected when it comes to their data. The report interviewed 18 agency chief information officers. Agency heads rated their own security just marginally below adequate. Their assessment of security across the state was clearly even lower. The report cites cutting the IT departments of many state agencies in recent years as a possible downfall of state data security, often splitting duties among multiple staff members. However, the report does publish recommendations for the state to fix the issues. The first, by creating a new Chief Information Security Officer position, then adding a committee to provide oversight of the development, and then identifying the use of a consultant to assist with the security process.
Our standards need to be much higher.
Senator Kevin Bryan, appointed to the subcommittee to investigate the breach at the South Carolina Department of Revenue, agrees with the report, telling News 19 South Carolina needs to become the most protected state in the country.
Government typically does not prevent problems from happening. We wait until something happens and then try to fix it. And we can't afford to do that in this situation.
Last week, the subcommittee said answers given by the South Carolina Department of Revenue Director Jim Etter and state security experts created even more questions in their investigation. With the release of the Inspector General's report, Bryant expects more of the same.
I need to know more information on what happened. And our next question is, what are we going to do to respond?
And tomorrow at 10 a.m., the subcommittee will hold another hearing looking into investigating the breach at the South Carolina Department of Revenue. Senator Bryant tells me they will meticulously review the Inspector General's report, which was released today. Of course, we do have that full report, all 18 pages, on our website, WLTX.com. In the Information Center, Nate Stewart.
Next week, letters are expected to go out notifying taxpayers whose bank accounts may be at risk because of the security breach at the State Revenue Department.
A judge is now allowing revenue officials to notify banks and credit unions of the 3.3 million bank account numbers compromised when someone hacked the department tax files. The governor's office worked with the banks to get that information released.
Tonight, one Midlands woman has come forward claiming to have had her identity stolen as a result of the breach.
News 19's Nate Stewart sat down with a woman who says her Social Security checks had been rerouted to a different bank account. Is that right?
Yeah, JR, 66-year-old Helen Roach receives one retirement check from the government to live off of, but after receiving a letter that her direct deposit information had changed, she became suspicious.
For this to have happened, I just don't understand it. I just can't understand it for the life of me.
You can imagine the surprise on Helen Roach's face when she opened this letter confirming her retirement checks had been rerouted to another bank account.
It usually takes us 1 to 2 months to change where we send payments.
Roach called over to the Social Security Administration, who confirmed her fears. Someone had used her personal information.
Here I am expecting my monthly check, and it's going into somebody else's bank account. Now I'm having to wait for mine.
Having filed her taxes online, Roach believes her information was stolen in the data breach at the Department of Revenue. But Juliana Harris with Consumer Affairs says it's hard to say for certain.
It would be difficult, and I don't know that we would ever be able to say definitively, yes, that was because of the Department of Revenue breach.
Consumer Affairs says if you believe you've been a victim of identity theft, there are steps to protect yourself. First, contact your bank and place a hold on the account in question. You can also place a fraud account on your credit report or even place a security freeze on your credit report.
It is very, very frustrating with me.
While no money was taken from her account, Roach remains skeptical of the system and her future financial security as a retiree.
I'm just about at my wit's end is what's happened to me, because I don't know how far this is going to go with me. You know, since they have my Social Security number, I don't know what's going to happen.
Now, she was told that someone had used the Social Security Administration's automated phone service to make the changes. Since then, Roach has then placed a block on her file so only she can alter her account information in person.
Yeah, I have a feeling that we're going to see a lot more people like her come forward.
Absolutely.
Are they suggesting that everybody do that now, go through the process of blocking it so that no one can change it by phone?
That's one of the things that will secure you definitely,
yeah.
You know, but one of the main things is just to go ahead and sign up for the Experian credit protection. That's the #1 thing they're recommending for everyone to do.
All right, Nate, thank you so much.
Thank you.